Stop telling people what's happening in your life, or tell it all as if it were perfect, and little by little it will become so. Have you ever had the life that everyone dreams of, and still felt like something inside you was broken? Have you ever woken up with a nameless sadness, in a bed you chose, in a city you once dreamed of, next to a partner you supposedly loved, and yet the emptiness held you tighter than anything else? I ask because you're not alone, and because there's something no one talks about, but many of us secretly feel. Sometimes, achieving your goals can be the worst emotional trap. Yes, you heard that right. You finish your degree. You land the job. You move in with the person who once promised you happiness. You're healthy, stable, even recognized. And yet one day you open your eyes in the morning, and you don't know why you can't breathe. It's not anxiety. It's not sadness. It's something deeper. A kind of emptiness that doesn't come from the outside, comes from you. And the worst part is that no one notices. Because from the outside, you seem fine. So you do what we all do. You start looking for answers in the wrong places. You change jobs. You end relationships. You move to a new city. And every time you leave something behind, you hope that feeling will go away. But it doesn't. It stays there like an internal echo no one else hears. But you can't silence it. And at some point, you face a question that changes everything. What if the problem isn't out there? What if it's inside me? That's what happened to me. And when I started looking inward, I discovered something that shook me to my core. Most of the decisions we make are based on a deeply flawed perception of reality. Did you know that you have conscious access to only 0.5% of all the information around you? That means everything you decide, believe, and feel is based on just a tiny sliver of the truth. Everything else, you ignore it without even realizing. So, what if that sadness you carry isn't actually yours, but a product of unconscious programming? What if your mind is sabotaging your present to protect a wound you don't even remember? What if the real problem isn't what you're missing, but the way you're telling your story? Yes, telling it all, explaining your life, justifying your choices, seeking approval. And here's the most disruptive idea of all. Maybe you're this sad because you talk too much. Maybe you feel empty because you gave away your story before you understood it. Maybe every time you tried to vent, you were actually weakening yourself. I don't say this to blame you. I say it because I did it too. And because today, I understand that there is a silent power that changes everything. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share could completely transform the way you live, speak, love, and heal. Today, we won't talk about magic solutions. Today, we're going to walk straight into the heart of your shadow, right into that place where the silence you've never dared to hear still lives. That's where your true power begins. I wasn't always aware of what was going on inside me. For years, I thought my discomfort was just a phase, a rough patch, stress maybe. I remember the exact morning I finally understood. I was alone, in a remote town, hundreds of miles from home, after having left everything behind. My job, my relationship, my friends. And still, that feeling was there. That emptiness in my chest. That invisible knot. That weight that wouldn't lift no matter what I did. How could that be possible? I had done everything you're supposed to do to feel better. I had rearranged all the pieces on the board. But the board itself was still the same. And that's when I realized it wasn't the place or the people or the choices. It was me. That's where my real search began. Not outward, inward. Not in the noise, in the silence. And it was in that silence that the hardest questions began to surface. Why do I feel the need to talk so much about what I'm going through? Why do I feel the urge to explain every decision I make? Why do I always feel more empty after sharing my process? That's when I discovered Carl Jung. And his words cut through me like a scalpel. Human beings need validation from others. But in doing so, they often give away their power. Has it happened to you? Have you felt that the more you talk about what hurts, the less people understand you? That the more you try to explain yourself, the smaller you feel? I have, and that's what made me stop. Not because speaking is wrong, but because I didn't know where I was speaking from. I wasn't speaking to heal. I was speaking to be accepted. I was speaking to avoid feeling alone. I was speaking because I was afraid to be alone with myself. And that was the conflict. That was the trap. And the worst part? It was invisible. No one teaches you to keep quiet when all you want to do is speak. No one explains that some battles are won in solitude, not through exposure. No one tells you that the soul also wears down when it's explained too much. But Jung understood. And his message wasn't just psychological. It was profoundly spiritual. Not everything you feel needs to be shared. Some things only need to be understood. And today I'm here to talk to you about that. About that inner space no one else sees. About that need to share, which may be quietly sabotaging your transformation. We're going to go deep. We're going to walk together through that uncomfortable place, where you'll learn that what goes unspoken doesn't disappear, transforms. There's something you need to know before we go any further. Your mind is not against you. It's not your enemy, but it is old. And it's programmed to protect you, not to make you happy. That's where the conflict begins. Carl Jung said that most of our lives are governed by forces we don't understand, forces we don't control, and most importantly, forces we didn't consciously choose. Did you know that more than 90% of what you think, feel, and do happens unconsciously? That percentage is staggering. It's like being the captain of a ship, but the wheel is hidden in a room you can't access. And that's the problem. We try to change our lives using the 0.5% of reality we can actually perceive, without realizing that the other 99.5%, the part we don't see, the part we don't understand, is what's really steering the ship. Picture it like this. You're standing in a room filled with information, electromagnetic waves, sound signals, subtle emotions, memories, thoughts, but you can only see a tiny fraction. And even with that tiny fraction, you make decisions that shape your destiny. That's the kind of ignorance Jung invited us to face with humility, not to feel small, but to begin seeing with new eyes. Because here's the painful truth. What you call bad luck is often unconscious programming. And that programming has a root, fear, a silent fear, an invisible one you learned at some point in your story, when you were very young, and your mind decided that in order to survive, you had to adapt, stay quiet, please others, or surrender. That fear got imprinted on your system. And today, whether you're 25, 40, or 60, even if you read self-help books, go to therapy, or repeat affirmations, you're still being driven by that pattern. Not out of malice, but out of protection. Your unconscious mind doesn't care about your happiness, cares about your safety. And if at some point being happy was dangerous, because someone left you when things were going well, because you were criticized when you shined, because you were ignored when you were truly yourself, then your unconscious learned that shining is dangerous. And that's why it sabotages you, out of love for your wounded self. Think about this. Have you ever started a project with excitement, but froze just when things were going well? Have you ever been in a beautiful relationship and suddenly started to distrust without reason? Have you ever been about to achieve something important and just then you got sick, postponed it, or ruined it? That's not a coincidence. It's your mind activating a protection protocol. And when you don't understand that, you interpret it as failure, as weakness, and you punish yourself. And you say, I always ruin everything. I'm not enough. There's something wrong with me. But there's nothing wrong with you. There's just an old program you haven't rewritten yet. Jung called it the shadow, the part of you that was rejected, wounded, or ignored, and now lives in the basement of your soul, acting from the shadows, in secret. And the shadow has a very particular trait. It sabotages your present to protect your past. Yes, even if it sounds absurd, your shadow would rather you relive the same old experiences. Loneliness, abandonment, scarcity, frustration, because they're familiar. And to your unconscious mind, familiar equals safe. And that's why talking too much about what you're going through often strengthens the saboteur. Every time you repeat your story without awareness, you reinforce it. Every time you talk about your pain without having processed it, you validate it as part of your identity. And every time you look to someone else to understand you, without first understanding yourself, you give away your power. It's not that speaking is wrong. It's that if you don't know where you're speaking from, you might be deepening your wound without realizing it. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And that's exactly what happens when we live on autopilot. We think we're choosing, but we're not. We're repeating. We fall in love with the same wound, wearing a different face. We return to the same type of relationship, job, conflict, and we say, "This is just how I am." But no, that's just your programming. Do you see it? Your life isn't what happens to you. Your life is what you do with what happens to you. And more importantly, what you tell yourself about what happens to you. And here's the paradox. Much of your suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but from the story you've built around it. The story you repeat every time you want to be understood. The story that keeps you stuck. That's why today we're not going to change what you lived. We're going to change the way you name it. Because when the story changes, the reality changes. And that's where true transformation begins. Here comes the hardest part, and at the same time, the most liberating. You are not broken. You're not failing. You're not weak. You're just programmed to survive. Yes. All the things you think you're doing wrong, the fear of moving forward, the procrastination, the need for approval, the self-abandonment, they're not flaws. They're unconscious protection mechanisms. Your mind doesn't sabotage you out of cruelty. It does it out of love. A distorted love, yes, but love nonetheless. And even though that may sound comforting, it also hurts. Because it means it was you, without meaning to, who kept the prison alive. That every time you turned away from what you truly wanted, that every time you gave up on yourself to fit in, that every time you explained yourself just to avoid rejection, it was you who pulled the trigger on that trap, believing you were saving yourself. Can you feel it? Can you look honestly at all those times you silenced your intuition so you wouldn't make others uncomfortable? All those times you said, yes, when you were dying to scream, no? All those times you talked too much, because you didn't know how to stand in your truth in silence? That impulse comes from long ago, from childhood, from moments where you learned that being yourself had a price. And to avoid paying that price again, your unconscious activated a warning system. If you dare to shine, you might lose love. If you say what you think, they might abandon you. If you go too far, they might hurt you. And so, to protect you, it holds you back, pushes you to retreat, to sabotage yourself, to speak before the right time, to explain what you haven't yet understood. It's no coincidence that every time you're about to take a leap, something inside you shrinks. That something is your inner child saying, "Are we sure it's a good idea to step out of the mold? Because last time it hurt." And it's right there where your strength fades, because you confuse protection with failure, and you start to see yourself as incapable, when in reality you're just repeating a survival pattern. But here's the truth that changes everything. You don't need more strength. You need more understanding. You're not stuck because you're weak. You're stuck because no one taught you how to read your inner mechanisms. Because no one explained to you that your mind can't tell the difference between what was and what is. And that many times it reacts as if you were still 7 years old, even though now you're an adult. That's the great paradox. You have an adult life run by an emotional system from childhood. And here comes Jung again with brutal clarity. What is not made conscious is lived as fate. That thing you call my personality, that this is just how I am, you keep repeating, might just be an outdated version of you, looping over and over because no one ever showed it how to evolve. And do you know what's most painful? That so often you share your process hoping someone will validate it, when what it really needed was to be heard by you. Because whatever you give away before understanding becomes exposed vulnerability, and whatever is exposed without roots becomes fragile. That's why this is the uncomfortable truth no one wants to face. Maybe you're not a victim of the world. Maybe you're just living the script you were taught. And if that's true, then there is a way out. But it's not in talking more, or running faster, or changing everything again. It's in pausing, observing yourself, and beginning to remember who you were before you learned to be afraid. Up until now, we've come to understand that many of your decisions don't come from your present self, but from an old version of you that's still operating from the shadows. Now it's time to take a step further, to name that shadow, to recognize the unconscious archetype that's been guiding your life without you even realizing it. Carl Jung dedicated a large part of his work to exploring archetypes, universal inner figures that live in the collective unconscious and shape how we think, feel, and act. But there is one specific archetype that lives inside you, and until you look it in the eye, it will keep sabotaging your path. Not because it's evil, but because it still doesn't feel heard. Here we'll explore some of the most common ones. I invite you not to analyze them with your mind, but to feel them in your body, because your shadow is not understood. It is recognized. 1. The hidden child. Do you struggle to make decisions without asking for permission? Do you feel like you need someone to tell you it's okay before you can move forward? Are you paralyzed by the fear of being abandoned? This archetype is born when your authenticity was rejected or ignored in childhood. It's a part of you that still longs to be seen, but hides to avoid being hurt again. Its unconscious phrase is, "I don't want to be a burden. I'd rather disappear." 2. The silent martyr. Do you tend to give in easily? Do you swallow your feelings to avoid conflict? Do you feel guilty when you think about putting yourself first? This archetype learned that love must be earned through sacrifice. It believes it's only worthy if it suffers for others. Its phrase is, "If I'm okay, others won't be, so I'd better erase myself." 3. The controlling perfectionist. Do you feel like it's never enough? Do you avoid showing vulnerability for fear of being judged? Do you demand more from yourself than you would from anyone else? This archetype emerged when you learned that mistakes were dangerous, that love only came when you did everything right. His phrase is, "If I'm not perfect, I don't deserve love." 4. The self-exiled rebel. Do you know you're capable of more, but don't act on it? Do you sabotage your own achievements just when things are about to take off? Do you push people away for no clear reason? This archetype learned to shield itself from disappointment by withdrawing. It punishes itself before others get the chance. Its phrase is, "I don't need anyone, but deep down, I'm dying inside." 5. The chronic people pleaser. Do you say yes when you really want to say no? Do you adapt so much that you've lost touch with who you really are? Do you fear that being your true self will make people leave? This archetype lives to please. It was programmed to earn affection by always giving in. His phrase is, "If I don't make others happy, they'll leave me." Now breathe and ask yourself with honesty, which one of these lives inside me? Not the one you wish you had. Not the one that sounds the most interesting, but the one that hurts. The one that gets triggered just as you're about to change. The one that appears when you're about to speak your truth, and you choose silence. The one that whispers, "Now's not the time, maybe later. You're not ready, you're not enough." That one is your hidden archetype. And if you recognize it, you can transform it. Because no archetype is your enemy. They were all born to protect you. The problem is that they've taken control. And now it's time to give them back their rightful place. I invite you to do this intimate exercise. You don't need to post it online. You don't need to tell anyone about it. Just close your eyes and ask yourself, who is making decisions for me when I shut down? Who am I silently obeying? What part of me needs to be heard? Not by the world, but by me. That's where healing begins. Not in changing who you are, but in lovingly integrating who you were without judgment. Because your shadow, in truth, wants only one thing: to be acknowledged, not as an enemy, but as the most loyal part of your story. Most of us learn to survive by fighting what we feel. We were taught that some emotions are good and others are bad. That fear should be repressed. That sadness should be hidden. That anger should be silenced. And that silence means loneliness. But Jung saw it clearly. What you resist persists. What you accept transforms. That's why the first step toward true emotional transformation isn't to fight your shadow. It's to sit with it, to listen, without judgment, without rushing, without shame. Maybe you've never done that before. Maybe every time an uncomfortable emotion appears, your instinct is to run, distract yourself, explain it away, or tell someone, just so you don't have to feel it. But today, I'm offering you something different. An encounter with yourself, with that part of you that lives in silence and has been waiting years for you to stop and truly look. I invite you to close your eyes just for a moment. Take a deep breath and silently repeat these words. I hear you. I'm not going to run from you anymore. I'm not going to try to change you. I just want to know what you're trying to tell me. Now imagine that part of you, your hidden child, your martyr, your perfectionist, your rebel, is sitting right in front of you. And for the first time in a very long time, it has permission to speak. Don't interrupt it. Don't correct it. Don't treat it like a mistake. Just listen. What would it say? Maybe it would say, I'm tired of pretending everything's okay. It hurts not to feel like I'm enough. I just wanted someone to tell me it's okay to be me. And instead of silencing it like before, just breathe and answer from the heart. I understand you. Thank you for protecting me all this time. You did the best you could. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. I'm here now, with all that I am. And I won't leave you. This is the beginning. It's not a magic affirmation. It's a commitment. The commitment to stop fighting yourself. Because what you've been calling self-sabotage, what you've labeled my demons, or my anxiety, or my insecurity, might just be a forgotten part of you, screaming to be heard. And when you listen, truly listen, with presence, without guilt, without resistance, something begins to shift. Not outside, inside. Your energy stops being spent on defense and starts being used to support yourself. Your body begins to relax. Your mind softens. Your soul finds rest. Because finally, you're no longer running from yourself. Can you feel it? This first step is the most important. Not because everything changes at once, but because, for the first time, you choose yourself. Not to demand more, but to love yourself in the place you've never been loved before. You've arrived at a key point. You've recognized your shadow. You've listened to it without judgment. And for the first time in a long time, something inside you has begun to quiet down. Now comes the next step, a symbolic act, a small ritual that has nothing magical about it. And yet, it changes everything. Because for a wound to heal, it needs two things, awareness and choice. And today, you're ready to choose a new path. Jung said that the shadow doesn't disappear. It is integrated. And when it's integrated, it stops sabotaging you and starts helping you. That archetype that once held you back can now push you forward. But it won't do so just because you wish it. It will when you give it a new role. Here's what I suggest. Take a sheet of paper and write down everything that part of you has done to protect you. No sarcasm, no blame, just honesty. For example, thank you for teaching me to stay silent when it wasn't safe to speak. Thank you for hiding me when it felt unsafe to be seen. Thank you for making me a perfectionist, because at the time, I believed that was the only way to be loved. And then, on that same sheet, write a new truth, a new order, a new story for your shadow. For example, today I no longer need to hide. Today, I allow myself to be visible without fear. Today, I no longer need to please everyone. Today, I can set boundaries without losing love. Today, I no longer need to be perfect. Today, I give myself permission to live with humanity. Write down everything you're ready to release, everything you no longer want to carry. And when you're done, burn it. Yes, burn it. With intention, with reverence. Like someone saying goodbye to an old guardian who did the best they could, but whose task is now complete. Look into that flame, even if it's small. And as it burns, say softly or silently, thank you for protecting me. Now I will take care of myself, because that's what emotional maturity is, stopping the need for protection to begin practicing presence. And if you can't burn it, that's okay. Tear it up, bury it, keep it as a witness to your new chapter. Do it however you feel called, but do it with intention, because this isn't just a symbolic gesture. It's a declaration of inner leadership. From now on, you decide how to use your story, no longer from shame, no longer from repetition, but from transformation. And if at any point fear creeps back in, if your shadow tries to take control again, don't reject it. Just gently remind it, you don't have to protect me anymore. I've got me now. That's the new narrative. That's your reprogramming. Not fast, not perfect, but real. Because the power doesn't lie in eliminating your darkness. It lies in integrating it with light. Sometimes we think that change is like flipping a switch, that one day, everything just clicks and suddenly we become a different person. But it doesn't work that way. Real transformation doesn't make noise. It doesn't shout. It doesn't get posted. It doesn't show at first glance. It happens in the most intimate spaces, like when the sun rises and the sky is still dark, but you already know the day has begun. If you've made it this far, I want you to know something inside you has already changed. Even if it's not yet reflected in your habits, even if you still stumble, even if you still have doubts, true change doesn't start when you act differently. It starts when you feel differently. And here are a few signs that your inner integration is already happening. 1. You start feeling uncomfortable with your old patterns. What you used to tolerate without question. Overworking, staying silent, the need to please now weighs on you. And even if you don't yet know how to leave it behind, you can no longer stay the same. That is awareness. And awareness is transformation. 2. You begin to hear your intuition more clearly. There are moments when something inside you says, "Don't explain this. Don't share that. You don't need to justify yourself." And you respect that voice, without guilt, without needing approval. That is quiet empowerment. Your shadow is turning into wisdom. 3. Your body starts to speak differently. You breathe more deeply. You sleep better. You feel less tension in your chest, your jaw, your stomach. And when discomfort appears, instead of running, you stay with yourself. That is self-regulation. You're learning to hold yourself. 4. Your relationships begin to shift subtly. You no longer need to be understood so much. You no longer share out of habit. You stop begging for attention. And the most beautiful part, you no longer find silence so painful. That is self-love. 5. You become more selective with your words. You speak less, but with more power. Not to prove anything, not to justify yourself, but to express yourself from a place of clarity. That is emotional maturity. And maybe you're wondering, but what if I don't feel any of this yet? Then hold on to this one sign. The very fact that you're asking these questions is already a sign of awakening. Because a mind that's still asleep doesn't question anything. It just repeats. And you're no longer repeating. You're observing. You're remembering who you are. And when that happens, everything else sooner or later starts to align. Trust, not in the external process, but in what has already begun to shift inside you. There is a moment in life when everything changes. And it's not when someone applauds you. It's not when you achieve your goals. It's not when everyone finally understands you. It's when you no longer feel the need to explain yourself. That moment when you look in the mirror and say, "I'm no longer that wounded girl who needed to be heard to feel worthy. I'm no longer that boy who silenced himself to be accepted. I'm no longer that version of me that kept repeating stories just to avoid feeling alone." That is the true awakening. When you choose to remain silent, not to hide, but to protect what you're cultivating. When you choose to speak, not to justify yourself, but to honor your truth. When you choose to stay with yourself, even if no one joins you, even if no one understands, even if the world keeps demanding that you explain, prove, or persuade, and you choose not to, because you no longer need permission to be who you are. That is freedom. That is emotional maturity. That is inner leadership. Today, you don't need to do anything grand. Just one thing. Choose to lead a part of yourself. Maybe it's your fear. Maybe it's your need to please. Maybe it's that inner voice that still doesn't dare to speak out loud. Whatever it is, choose it and begin walking with it, not against it. You don't have to tell anyone. You don't have to prove anything. Just write it in the comments, from that intimate place where you no longer want to hide. Today, I will lead and complete the sentence. Whatever comes up, no filters, from the soul. And if this message touched something inside you, if a part of you broke open, but at the same time felt freed, share it. Not for me, not for this channel, but for someone who hasn't yet realized they're giving away their power with every word they throw to the wind. For someone who still doesn't know that silence, too, can heal. Because sometimes just one phrase, just one pause, just one truth spoken from the soul can awaken someone who needs it most. And if this kind of content resonates with you, subscribe. Because we're not here to entertain. We're here to transform. To remember that in the midst of all the noise, there's still a sacred place that belongs to us, our inner world. And when you inhabit that place with dignity, you no longer need to explain anything, because your whole life starts speaking for you.